We begin our story with a man wielding a sword, as well as cutting the dead in half. Subsequently, the man thrust his sword into the ground, and, panting from exhaustion, he expelled his aura. Then, the man saw an insulting image on Google. He says he will continue to live in the underworld no matter how much his body suffers from the swarm of the dead before him. Then, as he wondered how that endless battle could make sense, he once again drew his sword and swung it at the dead. The man then cuts off the head of an undead standing near him, while proclaiming that he is the monarch of the human race and a hero. He then murders the dead as they repeatedly attack him. But suddenly, he sees a huge foot in front of him, causing him to become enraged and to invoke the ruler of the underworld. Our protagonist, who has fiery red hair, appears, and the man questions him about his desires. Then the man stares at the huge gods of the underworld, with our ruler of the underworld, and questions the audacity of our protagonist for doing it with a king like him. He blows the cigar smoke out of his mouth and addresses the man as A. Then he wonders about man's sanity, and whether he still believes that he is the Almighty, since he was a child, who could take something away, the human monarch who can lead the people, and the monk who defeated the enemy. Then, saying to the man in front of him, he angrily places his cigarette on the shaft. Still, he was a sinner. Then he reminds him that he was just a sinner who destroyed the homes of innocent people. He was simply a man who went to war. And he cut off the boy's head for trying to rebel. Grabbing the man's pants, the deceased slowly approaches him, while explaining to him that he was only a king and that he massacred many people to take the throne. However, at that time he was not yet aware of death. Crawls up to the sobbing man, and informs the man that he is the king of the place, and that the only way out is through him. Once all the lives it has claimed are content with their anguish, therefore, it must remain there and remain shattered. The man then begins to scream in agony as the dead man begins to tear him apart. Years later, a member of the underworld king's staff, by the name of, tells you that in a low voice and with cold eyes, he uttered that. Then, upon naming him, she says, "That's cool," with excitement. Our protagonist, Yamra, ruler and guardian of the underworld, tells Naming that he feels ashamed of himself for bringing up the subject for 300 years. Naming replies that he expects to be depressed, which makes Yamra laugh and wonder why he would be depressed. Naming responds, saying that since abruptly declaring his retirement, Talbo could to be his heir, but Talbo still has many shortcomings. Since he was under the impression that Talo was doing well, he asks Naming if this is true, and Naming replies that he has heard that many people are struggling because of Talo. He laughs as he identifies the culprit, and says he should be suffering because his sin was washed away. When he arrives at the underworld palace, he stops walking, and the name tells him that all he has to do now is start the reincarnation challenge. He admits when Naming that he is a little anxious. She then expresses her gratitude for all his time and work and assures him that she will remember him even after reincarnation. Despite the difficulty of reincarnation, the appointment laughs and tells him that he must keep his word. He placed his palm on the underworld palace gate and opened it, informing the appointment that humans are capable of such things. While kindly Naming informed him that she believed the same thing was happening to him, and that he should not cry out of fear, Naming made him laugh and urged him not to worry about Talbo. However, he stopped talking in surprise when he realized what was inside the palace. Naming asked him about it, and if there was another option. Then she asked him, "Why is it so quiet?" as she looked at him. However, the appointment was horrified to witness the interior of Palace 2, making you wonder what happened and why the interior is a forest. Naming informed him that the river was supposed to overflow with blood, but now it is only water. And instead of hearing people cry, you can hear the birds singing all around. Naming shouted, "What is that Talo trying to do?" and laughed, calling him crazy. Then someone warned that the pot had cooled unexpectedly, although it should have been boiling. And instead of dead people, the container now contained rain. Asking where Tibua is and creating a name panic. Naming had advised him to return, because he believes that he is not made for that place. However, he only asked him what Talo was doing and what would happen to his reincarnation, which made him angry and made him wonder if he was just considering his rebirth. He angrily asked Naming if he realized how much he had been looking forward to this moment, and informed Naming that he would not be able to enjoy his second life without his Talo. However, when he tried to advise him to stay away from, he asked him what he wanted to avoid, what was wrong with him, and if he was going crazy. He was about to touch the appointment when his hand also began to go limp, making him wonder why his hands are like that, and turned to look at them in bewilderment. Nain suddenly shouted at him, telling him to stop because that's what he had said. However, he only gave me a puzzled look. He did not realize that there were lights over his head. Then the light struck him, and when he turned to look at it, he saw the sky of the underworld open up and a bright, intense light descend upon him. When he asked who had done it, the light addressed him as king of the underworld and informed him that it had been some time since they had seen each other, leading him to wonder what he had been confused about. Then, as he continued to examine the fissure, he noticed a figure. He referred to the figure as God and asked him if he wanted him to look for Talbot as well, pointing out that it was he who neglected them, so it was his fault, and asks him why he should leave. However, God keeps silent and resurrects him by means of light. He tells God that he was speaking in that authoritarian tone once again, and that his boss incompetence prevented him from reincarnating. However, he was no longer his own person, and if he cannot recall, he was ready to tell her that he had retired. Still, the glow lifted him higher, causing him to look up and angrily wonder if he was too old to remember. He then commands God to be silent and unleashes his immense power to erase the light that attracts him. Then he drops to the ground and lifts his head to see. The crack in the sky closes little by little, as God watches you. However, a hand then takes hold of the closing sky, and he promises God that he will not go. However, his true desire is to resurrect in order to locate Talo, and the cost of this will be borne by him. He then orders them to follow him into the crevice, and the crack in the sky fades away, leaving the underworld unattended. Then they were cast down to earth by the heavens, and he quickly descended with Namong. Seeing a damaged road, he quickly descended on it, causing the earth to crack. Then she carefully got to her feet and turned to him. Observing that this was the world of humans, he wondered why it was so disorganized. Suddenly, he heard people running and shouting. Then, as they passed him, they shouted at him to run away. However, he merely looked up and waited for something to light up, and seeing the dead emerge from the flames, shocking him and making him wonder if they were the dead. Next, the dead jumped to their side to chase the crowd. When he came to understand that this was the reason why the dead remained in the human world and not in the underworld, one of the deceased was holding the girl's feet when she suddenly let out a terrified scream, saying she was in pain. The young girl then called her mother while crying in terror. The child screamed in agony when the dead man opened his mouth to devour his soul. He jumped up and stood next to the dead man and the child. Then he punched the dead away furious, causing it to fly and collide with the adjacent structure. He saw that there was an overwhelming smell of blood. Deception turned to him after sniffing it. Then, with an angry question to all of them, the deceased got down on his knees and asked them if they were all crazy, if the underworld is not enough for them, and how dare they transgress in your presence. He is aware that the dead person was a being that materialized after the disappearance of a human, and they pay the price for the sins they committed throughout their existence in the 8 hells after being judged by the judges of hell. After being punished, the repentant soul is reborn to a new life. And it was the realm of the dead, but question what it is now. He then reinterrogates the deceased to see if they are truly insane. However, one of the dead then shouts angrily at him. When he is thinking, "What's the point of saying it if they don't understand it anyway?" all the deceased jump on him and attack him. "The sinners must be defeated because they have been wrong since time immemorial," he groaned, as you struck one of the dead on the chin, making him cough up blood. He then struck the dead man in the side. However, the deceased grabbed him from underneath. But instead of letting him go, she just glared at him angrily, making him tremble. Nevertheless, he brought his fist down and struck the dead man's head hard, causing it to crash to the ground with force and rise upward. Then, making force with his fist, he hits his skull hard once more. When he hit the ground again, his head shot upward. He then slammed his skull back down hard with his hand, shattering the floor in the process. The deceased waited until the smoke cleared, and they sweat with fear as they stare at him. He looks at them and asks why they don't attack him. Wiping the blood from his cheeks, he told them not to let him know when they wanted to wake up. Suddenly, he noticed someone approaching him quickly from a distance, and he managed to dodge it in time, causing it to hit the adjacent building with great force. Nambra asks about your well-being. However, it only waits for something to happen to realize that the deceased is creating a path. A foot then emerges from the flames, and a powerful dead figure emerged, holding something in his hands. Ning informs you that the deceased's environment has changed. However, he is already aware of it and, in particular, of the strong smell of blood. Then the man threw something on the ground. He observed that it was the head of a human. Then the dead man let out a fierce snarl and pointed the cutting steel at him. Naming informs her that the man is dead and rude, and she asks if she should go assassinate him. However, he just sulks silently. Identifying yourself fearfully, tell him to forget about it, since he was surprised, and to leave. The man threw the sharp object with force of the steel towards him, and let it fly in his direction. However, he only informs him that he smelled burnt and sticky, and asks him why he was killing people. He asks her if she was trying to reincarnate, believing it was because she had absorbed his vitality. Subsequently, he effortlessly stops it with one hand by gripping the steel. Believing it impossible, since reincarnation without proof is an abominable taboo, he throws the steel aside. And with that, he jumps quickly, breaking the ground. The man was startled by what he did, and he came quickly to the man's side, believing that the knowledge. For him, only Talo could be his heir. The dead man was then punched in the stomach, lifting the man in the air. He threatens to burn the sinner and burn the man with his hellfire, causing the man to cry out in agony. Then, with the second hand at the ready, he relentlessly assaulted the victim with both hands, causing the victim to be pushed hard against the structure and numerous holes in the body. She approaches him and stretches out her neck. After seeing him, he stepped on his head, then told the man that he had gone so far as to kill people, calling him a crazy bastard. I told the man to answer, asking him why he had killed them if the plan was for them to be reincarnated. However, he repeatedly kicks the man's head while interrogating him as to why he killed them when the man does not respond. The man looks at him and continues to throw pebbles at him out of anger. However, he simply avoids them, believing there is no justification. And man is too weak for a vitality absorber, making him question whether he is making too many assumptions. Suddenly, the man leapt forward, carrying a huge rock, making him wonder whether the man intended to use, and declared it absurd, unable to see the shuffling of hands below. Then the deceased grabbed him, making him look down in disbelief. And the man was standing in front of him when he looked up. Subsequently, the man smiled and hit him firmly on the head with the stone. The man laughed, picked up the rock again and hit him repeatedly, till the stone broke into fragments. However, a powerful force severed the man's arm. She asked him why he had stopped laughing, causing the man to stop in confusion. I was furious with him and looked at him suspiciously, as if something was wrong. He then gives them the order to stop and releases the powerful aura of fire that had surrounded the man's body, burning and making the victim scream in agony. Subsequently, his fire grew and spread. Building it hit and burned all the dead. Then, after positioning himself and leaning down to release his fire, he jumped higher. It then landed on the roof of an adjacent building. The red moon was overhead as he turned to look back. He then inquired about their welfare and addressed them as spirits, asking if they would agree. The burned victims on the ground tremble in agony. Then the man raised his hand and bowed to him, as did all the deceased. The other deceased person bowed to him, as everyone bent over in agony. He then informs them that he will judge. He tells them that his sins are those of evading the sin of generating chaos while jumping off the building, and the transgression of harming a human being. He also informs them that, because of their transgressions, they will serve a 7-year sentence for wreaking havoc. Everyone is surprised to learn that those who harm humans face a penalty of 10,000 years, while those who flee face 2,000 years. He told Talo to say something if he didn't like it as he raised his hand. Then reach out and pull the fabric out of the space, opening it up. He then pulled on it, making it much larger. The dead enter the subway space of the palace and scrutinize their surroundings in bewilderment. He answers that it is where they are headed, to which the man asks again with different words. And he replies that they will go there even if it is covered with trees and grass. Then, after informing them that they would focus on weeding, he kicks the man inside. After the man spoke with him, he instructed them to just use their hands to clean up any green debris that appeared, turning to tell him anything and making the man weep with astonishment. However, he simply closed the portal. If the dead man was not trying to communicate something, Naming asks him, to which he replies that it must have been that he will work hard. However, Naming asks him if he will catch the few who rushed before because he believes that the deceased did not say anything. When he heard this, he was stunned and asked why he was saying it now and where they were going. Nominating, they replied that they were going to school. Meanwhile, outside the hallway in classroom 2 on the second floor of the school, while the students hide, the deceased begin to wander. The woman warns the others that it will be difficult to succeed there, and Lu, who works as an undertaker, advises the students to look for another path. The woman asks him if she is not an undertaker, and why the hunter of the dead is so weak when other undertakers have almost supernatural powers. The man asks him if they won't all die if he keeps this up. He then asked again if she knew how to help, to which she replied that, although she had not yet located any deceased persons to donate their clothes to, she would find a way to protect them, so they should not worry. The dead abruptly noticed them and rushed at them in a fury to fight. They had found them, he shouted, and gave them the order to hurry. She was grabbed by one of the dead, who tried to bite her. The door was open, shouted one of the students, and he managed to expel the dead. She then directs them to proceed, saying that she will follow in a moment. The woman, however, screams in agony when one of the dead grabs her foot. The dead man opens his jaws to bite her, making her scream for help and scream in terror. Jay dodged it in time, only to be hit instead. He shot a pained glance at the dead man before kicking him away. He asked about the woman's welfare, but the woman simply told him not to touch her and slapped his hand away. When she was slow, the woman asked her if she was even an undertaker as she rushed up the stairs and screamed that she had been about to die. However, he merely smiled, noting that he seemed to have no injuries left. He yelled at her to hurry up and close the door. He hurried up the stairs and slammed the door shut. The man was worried and thought the dead man might break in, so he asked if he was okay when the deceased knocked fiercely on the door. Jay replied that he would be fine for a while. Then, in an attempt to call for help, he pulled out the firearm and let it fly. He urges them to hold on because the eldest is about to arrive, smiling. However, the man informs him that he was very upset that he laughed instead of trying to find a solution, and that the death of an elite like them would be a loss to the country. Confusion in her. The woman informs him that, despite her claims of being an undertaker, she was completely useless and recently came dangerously close to death due to her incompetence. The woman then taunts her, demands to know who her father is, and threatens to kill her if she hurts him. They were stunned to learn that Yum had suddenly emerged and told them they had no manners. When he tells her, the woman is furious and asks who he is and how long he has been there. Asks him again, "Who is it?" He replies, "The retired king of the underworld." But a clap of thunder breaks out before he can finish. And thunder always cuts him off when he tries to proclaim himself king of the underworld. He then looks up and informs San, the Jade Emperor, that they should discuss it, leaving the woman to wonder if he was crazy. Then the man pushed him and asked him if he was crazy, as well as how he got there, and who the asshole was for crying so hard. In response, he said he pursued the dead. He jumped up, wondering what had happened, because he smelled human blood. The woman named Soy tells them that Yamra believes he may be an undertaker. The man mocks him, asking him what he is saying and if he is really hunting the dead. The man then tells him that his clothes are unusual manuals that not even a beggar would wear. He tells Ning that those are the children, so he should leave them alone when she asks him if she should murder the man. And the reason for that is that his parents deceive them about schooling. So when his parents pass away, he needs to beat them, which makes the man question who he is talking to. He merely asks the man what he means by rape, and the man tells him not to pretend he doesn't understand. The man grabs him by the shirt as he tells them to look at him naturally raping his parents and asks him if he wants to die. Gio tries to calm them down and stop them from fighting, but the man simply tells him to stop talking and leave. She explained that she had to defend him. However, the man told her she was boisterous and pushed her away. He made an effort to think rationally, but his shoulder hurt. Yamra wonders if the deceased will be able to survive until more undertakers arrive, after realizing that her bite is becoming contaminated. Then he looks at Gio, thinking how familiar he looks to him. The man then addresses him as a bastard, telling him to look at him and asking if he realizes how scary they are. Explain to him, then, that the king of hell will weep and pray if his father goes to hell, and that his father will only apologize sarcastically for not having noticed. Making him chuckle, he asked if the ruler of the underworld would really cry and pray, making the man wonder why he is laughing and what is wrong with him. In addition, if you laugh. The man thought he had no knowledge and raised his fist at him, but he preferred to hit him because his father would take care of. He shouted, "No, don't hit Yamra." However, the man punched him hard in the face and gave him a fierce look. When the thunderers materialized in the sky, the Jade Emperor was informed by their names that it was too late to stop Yamra. Suddenly, Jiao gave him a hug and ordered the Jade Emperor to assess the situation. She questioned him about how he just stood there and advised him to dodge. However, he began coughing uncontrollably and coughing up blood. She keeps telling him to stay behind and promises to always protect him. She then turned to him and said, "Enough of losing someone all at once." The man tells him not to and asks if he was trying to paint him as a villain. Then, while calling Joe trash and ordering him to know his place, the man pulled out his knife. Then a mighty clap of thunder arose in the sky as the man brandished his knife at her, informing the Jade Emperor that he would appoint someone if he discovered a sinner. With astonished eyes, he asked the Jade Emperor how he could have ignored him. With a cry of agony, the man dropped the knife. She slapped his hand while screaming that it hurt, asking, "Can't you hear me?" and threatening to kill him. He asked her seriously if she thought killing someone was simple, making the terrified man slurp his own saliva. He questioned the man's parents about their parenting style before giving him a firm handshake that caused the man to scream in agony. Then the man pulled his hand away and shouted, "Leave me alone!" The man then called him an asshole and threatened to murder him and tell his father that he no longer cared about him. Then he would throw his corpse to the dead, but his stench would prevent them from eating it. Saying, "This guy hasn't come to his senses." He questioned the man about the promises he had made about his physique. He knelt down, puzzled as to why he was conversing with the man while he was unable to hear him. Then, declaring that sinners have always been beaten to wring answers out of them, he picked up the stick lying on the ground and snapped the twig. The man asked what he was muttering. However, he merely said he would give it a name, instructed the man to examine the stick in his hand, and then asked if he had any other ideas. The man asked him what garbage he was talking about. The other man, however, shouted that it was Elder Harry Potter's wand. The man merely said he was dead on when he informed him that he sounded wonderful. Still, it knocked the stick man on his ass. The man asked her what she had said and if she now realized what was going to happen to her as soon as she turned to look at him while grabbing her ass, and threatened to hit the guy with Harry Potter's wand. The man screamed in agony when he hit him again in the buttock after firing his cane. However, he raised the cane once more and swung it forward, telling the man to describe the taste of Harry Potter. He smacked the man's ass once more, making him groan and scream in agony. He asked the man if it hurt, and if he regretted it as he continued to hit him. Naming gave him a concerned look and informed him that he was the center of everyone's attention. But all he could do was laugh and wonder if he was right as he said, "Burn the sin, Harry Potter." The man collapsed to the ground. The man was unresponsive because of the pain, so she stopped hitting him and asked him how he was, and if he had regained consciousness. He warned him to take an exam or else Harry Potter would give him another beating. The woman suddenly screamed in terror, pointing to the hand as she said, "Hand, the dead are coming up." All the dead crawled toward them when they realized. When the woman sobbed and begged Jiao what to do, Jiao urged her to stand behind her, forcing her to call out to her. She instructed them to hurry downstairs, and she would give them some time. "How can you go there again when there are so many dead?" the woman cried out. Jay replied that the only chance was now, since everyone was dead. He then gave her the order to move, to which she agreed, and they all ran in the direction of the door. He was confused when Jiao instructed him to accompany them, but she assured him that she would take care of everything. He informed her that, although he had seen many people before, it was the first time he had seen someone like her. When she was insulted and neglected, she asked why she was helping them without thinking of herself. Even though those idiots had never met Grace, she was willing to put her life on the line to keep them safe and she wasn't even angry. However, she merely slapped him upside the head, referring to him as a child, and told him that his excessive way of speaking for his age confused her. Then, as I told her to stop talking like that and to come down, as it was not safe there, she advanced towards the disease. He sighed, wondering if there was an absolute line, considering how unpredictable Gio really was. However, he was aware that she did not have to pass away because he was by her side. He then launched an attack using his ability without Ryra up. However, a powerful thunder then materialized and spoke to him. He turned to the Jade Emperor and asked him if he had ordered him to get out of the way and meet Talbot in that circumstance. The Jade Emperor then answered her question, "And those humans?" However, he merely angrily asked the Jade Emperor whether it mattered whether he perished or not. He looked back in horror as the door behind them suddenly slammed shut, and he heard the man laugh and call him a stupid bastard. In addition, the man informed him that he did not know that the door had been locked and that he could no longer enter. Besides, he should have perished there with that foolish woman and should not have laughed like that. Then, with a chuckle, the man came down and told her that she had served him well, making him grit his teeth in anger and insulting them, with which the nomenclature immediately agreed and disappeared. One of the dead jumped up to hit him. However, Gyu then tackled him and protected him from the dead. Instead, they all beat her, and he endured the pain. He asked him, surprised, "Why the hell are you doing all this?" However, she merely nudged him and asked him again if he needed a cause to stand up for others, causing him to look at her dumbfounded. However, the thunder informed him once again, making him believe that Talo is absent. The dead lose their heads and the living die, making him question why he is being detained so much. Thunder informed him that these were the rules of the gods, and he responded by saying that, although the laws are fine, innocent people die. Then, using his ability to burn the Sin Blast, he struck all the dead nearby. Then, while he was still alive, he rushed towards the other dead to murder and burn them all at once, informing Gio that there was not enough manpower at the moment, but it was still good. While he prayed to the gods not to stop him and promised to handle things his way from now on. He went on to inform Gio that there was a significant salary afterward. Thus, you should enroll in the 4 major insurance plans, and you would go on a trip without thinking about it. She will also receive a pension when she retires, and will be born the daughter of a landowner in her next incarnation. He then asked him what he thought about God's workplace and his response to his offer. She replied that it was excellent and a fantastic job. She still seemed to have strength, so he pulled her aside and inquired about her well-being. She said, "I'm fine," as she looked at her injured hand. However, she informed him that they should meet again in the next life, because she understood that it was already too late. He removed the rubber band from his hair and added, "You know what? They should live now." He was horrified when it revealed to him the manifestation of the underworld. He noticed a huge white tree as they descended into the underworld. He was the first person to arrive there with a human body, he informed her, and invited her to enter the first underworld he had created. He then introduced himself as a new employee and said he was pleased to meet her. She asked him in surprise if he had claimed it was the underworld and patted the tree, realizing it was a large tree, which caused him to comment that it was quite unexpected. She also noted that all her wounds had healed and begged him to engage her before asking who she was. He ran his finger through his hair tie, and in response stated that he is the great ruler of the hereafter. However, you can address him as Yom Nim and ask him if he is still inquiring about him. She questioned him astonishingly as to whether or not he really is the king of the underworld. However, He merely asked her to hold his hand and said, "What is your name?" Li Ji was his response. While assuring her that she was equal to a god, he tied the crimson ribbon in her hair to her wrist. He was aware that this was a total fabrication, but she would no longer grow old, die, or simply live. She asked him what it was, and he told her it was pretty. Suddenly, however, he saw something in the sky, which alerted him that they should move, as something seemed to be approaching. He took her hand and said, "It's a chain of fate," asking her if she wanted to know what it was. When she asked what a chain of fate was, he advised her to pay close attention. He then informed him that he could not survive there if he did not have it. "They don't have time," he informed her, but she still looked puzzled. She wondered if they would part ways if she didn't have it. And he replied that since it was the end, it wasn't. Then she was startled awake when someone shouted her name again. Concerned, the man asked her if she was awake. When he realized it was Miho, Mho told him he was relieved that she was awake, saying he was quite worried when her eyes did not open. Looking at Miho, he reflected on what had happened. He then sat up and asked Miho how they had gotten there. He says he detected a signal, and that is why there are no casualties. They will now take care of all the debt. Miho asked him if he was referring to the students he had rescued when he asked about the students. He then revealed to her that, while they are hidden in the classroom, there is an oddity. Ask what it is with concern. Miho replied that some of them looked like they were being licked by something big because of the sticky substance covering their bodies. She asked Miho, perplexed, if she had said, "Licked," to which Mho laughed and replied, "Yes." She wondered if it was a dream as Miho prepared to share more information with her. Remembering Waya's face, he realized that he still held the true rope of fate, proving to him that it was not a dream. When someone called her name and asked about her well-being and whether she had been harmed, she recognized that she was Parna and answered, "Which was fine, although I thought it was thanks to Yamra, who arrived despite being a little late." She then praised Ya for caring about her, but Yuna told her to stop talking and asked who cared about her at that moment. He assured her that he wouldn't have done it if it weren't for her skills. "I told him in passing that he should not be late for work," she said, with regret, that she understood. However, Miho gave him a gentle nudge and informed him, "You shouldn't take it seriously because Yona was really worried about her." He asked Miho, full of excitement, if it was true, and he told him that Yuna had gotten there right away. Miho said it wasn't just about work when she asked if it wasn't. He moved in the direction of the cab and entered it a little later. Miho thanked him while telling him that he could go home today and that they would see each other again tomorrow. Then, while she was inside, believing the children were safe, the cab began to drive away. He remembered Yam telling him it was the end as he contemplated the thread of fate in his hand, making her realize that, if true, she was dead. However, the appointment subsequently informed him that he had a contract with the underworld, making her scream in horror. The driver asked him if he was okay. She nervously replied, "It's just a bug and I'm fine," before moving on. She said in a whisper, "Name him," to which the name replied, "He's Wyas' advisor." He phoned and said he understood, then asked if anyone else could see him. Naming assured him that he need not fear, as he could not be seen by other people. But Naming let him know that it was cringe, and that he could talk to him in a relaxed manner. When he asked Naming where Yamra was, Naming said that Yamra had visited the students, asking him if Yam really visited that place. Naming chuckled and assured him that since Yam had gotten there on his own, you should finish it soon. After some thought, he remembered Yam laughing and punching the student. She called anxiously to the driver and said something fearful. In the meantime, he arrived somewhere and looked at the huge structure in front of him. He stated that he was surprised by its size and wondered if it would be difficult to manage. Knowing he could no longer run away, he approached him and indicated to the students to wait. Then he saw a man approaching the automated door. He could see the door open, so he wondered if that might be it. He continued to argue that people are fascinating as he headed for the door. Feeling confused, the man entering telephoned to let him know that it was not the door. Yam was about to say anything when he sarcastically muttered, "Hey!" to the man. But when his face hit the glass of the door, it cracked. But instead, he tore it to pieces and yelled at it to open up, causing the man to wonder how he had managed to break the finest glass. When he realized that it would not open, he questioned everyone there about their expressions. He then informed them that they could see him at once. "There is an intruder," the guard said, "and they must raise the alarm." Then the alarm sounded and, as people wondered what had happened, the guards surrounded Ed. From above, the woman leaned forward to get a better look at them. "I was puzzled when I saw it." Smiling, he asked what it was, and why it gave off such tremendous vitality. He wondered if he, too, was really the king of the underworld. But then he turned to her, confusing her. However, he quickly disappeared and stopped in front of her, causing her to take a surprised step back and give him a look of astonishment. She was surprised that he had traveled so far in such a short time and that he had convinced her that it was him. And he gave her a serious look. Smiling, he asked if there were any problems. However, he merely asked her who she was while pointing at her, causing her to laugh nervously and inform him that she was still the same and still couldn't remember faces. As it was their first meeting, she also told him, "You should allow him to welcome you properly and identify himself as Bo, a former resident of the underworld." However, they heard someone shouting at them to stop talking and just do as they were told. The man ignored the guards' attempts to stop him, telling them to respond and asking if they had delivered what he had asked for. The student pleaded with his guard to stop talking and not to lecture him, to which the guard replied that he had brought him and was going to say something to the man. The student then asked the guard what he would do if the incident happened to him again. However, he merely looked at the man, believing he had located him. He was about to tell her he was leaving when she took off his clothes. He asked her if she was looking for that girl, if she was incapable of listening to her before acting, and if punishing the girl really mattered to her. He answered yes, confusing her and making her wonder what he meant. He said she still did not understand, and that her police or judges might have turned their backs or turned a blind eye. Alternatively, they may argue that it was not that big a deal. But since the Lord of Hell always punishes the sinner, he cannot overlook the child. And many decent people have endured, giving him a stunned and incredulous expression. Then, believing the child to be the same, he jumped up and quickly materialized in front of the child. The man yelled at him, claiming he was sure he had locked him out. As he asked the man if he thought he couldn't get out, he reached into his coat and grabbed something, and reminded him that he had threatened to be beaten up by Harry Potter if he didn't come to his senses about what he had done. Then, confusing the man, he showed him the staff, and wondering what kind of shit Harry Potter was and why. However, the man collapsed to the ground and began to sob, pleading with him to stop, which made Biker realize that he was effective. The guard shouted to the other guards to stop the intruder, as he was there. The guard then charged at him to stop him. However, Biker stopped the guards in their tracks when he raised his hand. He said that since he was not an enemy, they should leave him alone. The understanding of the guards and his departure informed him that he could do whatever he wanted. Besides, He thought Baiku was a good leader and wondered why they paid so much attention to her. He was stunned and furious when the man left abruptly, explaining that he had run away once again. However, a security motioned for him to stop, saying that the child was President Kang's son. The guard replied, "You still don't seem to get it." When asked so what, the guard went on to tell him that Kang was the head of the Kung Group, which was the third largest conglomerate in Korea, and was well known in the business community. He questioned the guard again. What was the reason? He told him he still didn't understand. The guard grabbed him by the collar and ordered him to pull his hands away from his young master. He tried to throw him hard as he told him to go away. But the guard remained motionless, leaving him to wonder if it was all a dream. Although Yoma's weight was very different from his own, the guard was aware that he would end up dragging Yoma, and wondered why Yom wasn't moving. Taking the guard by the hand, he asked him if he wanted him to admire the boy for the mere fact that he was the son of a well-to-do man. And I commented to the guard that it was fascinating. The man asked the guard, who was sweating, if he wanted him to believe he had power if he had money, and the guard wondered what kind of power it was, and if it was even human. He then asked the man if he understood and threw him over his shoulder, warning him to stop blathering. He then laughed and asked the guard if he also thought it was acceptable to commit a crime because he was powerful. Otherwise, he said, his punishment would be reduced, just as it was when he was mentally or physically weak. He asked the guard if he believed that such a world existed, but found that it did not. He laughed out loud. The guard angrily grabbed him by the wrist and yelled at him to stay still. Then the guard ripped off his uniform and yelled at him, telling him that not everyone can wear protective gear, not just morticians like him. He was startled to see an aura come out of the guard's chest. The guard then changed and punched him in the chest like a bouncer, and set out to use his iron fist ability to confront him. The guard frowned at him and crouched down. I jumped at him quickly, surprising him, and was hit on his side. The guard then struck him in the chest with another iron fist. The guard continued to hit him, building up a storm of force with his fist, and then punched him hard with it, creating a large smoke when it was thrown and hit the wall with force. Clenching his fist, the guard haughtily asked him what he thought, then proudly informed him that it was an ability he possessed known as Iron Fist. However, the guard was astonished to hear that it was a pity and asked Baiku what he had just stated. He politely indicated to the guard to turn around. And it was so pitiful, oblivious to Yammer's attack from behind, accusing him of sin. The guard turned back in surprise and saw a fist near him. He then punched the guard hard in the face. But he realized that it would be more difficult than he had expected. The guard trembled with astonishment and asked how he could stand normally after all he had done. Then the guard angrily threw his fists at him while shouting that he would not let him stand up. Again the guard hit him continuously, but he blocked each of the guard's punches using his hand, making the guard think it was silly and wonder if he was saying he could do it all with one hand. He asked the guard if he was wearing a shroud and told him he was good at doing crazy things. He then kicked the guard hard in the face and immediately turned around. Then kicked the guard in the face again. Once again, he rolled his body to one side as he told the guard that he had made a judgment. And he brandished his fist suddenly for more than 3 months so that he does not try to raise his head. He then threw his fist towards the guard, causing the guard to realize he was being pushed back by the force, velocity, and destructive power, and wondered what was. Then he hit the guard's head hard with his fist, and blood splattered everywhere as the guard realized he was not at the level of a human. Then Baiku saw a big explosion, and when the smoke slowly faded away, he saw the guard's head stuck in the ground. Baiku realized that Yam was making it brilliant. However, something was wrong, and he thought Yam was weaker than before. Suddenly Yam called her name, causing her to be surprised and ask why. He asked why humans wear shrouds when a shroud is the clothing of the deceased. She told him not to think it was too strange because it was just for protection. And it had been more than 20 years since the departed came to the human world, so the humans made an effort to protect themselves. He told her that they could just fight and asked why they had to wear a shroud. She replied that humans are weaker than the deceased by nature. And when the deceased cross the river of Styx, they are bitten by scaly monsters. They run for hundreds of years doing everything they can to avoid being crushed. And they also cultivate with 100 pounds weights. Thus, the more a deceased person commits a serious crime and is punished for a long time, the more superior he or she becomes for humans. However, some of the deceased repented by lending their shrouds to humans, and that is how humans gain the power to fight the dead. Also, most of them become undertakers and fight the deceased as the bodyguard before they can fall in a different direction. She looked at him and saw him sweating, making her wonder why his expression was like that. Suddenly someone said a shroud was an unavoidable option, and naming it told him to get to the point, because Yam is not usually stupid, causing him to be surprised to see him name. Naming, smiling, said to Baiku, "It has been a long time since we have seen each other." Baiku told Naming that it had been a long time and asked how many years had passed. Naming replied that he thought it had been 300 years. Making Yoma shocked and screaming, asking Naming if they know each other. Moming asked Baiku if she did not recognize her, and she laughed awkwardly while saying that it had been a while after all. Yam shouted, asking how he could recognize Baiku when she is a human, but Naming told him that she is not even human. Yu pointed to Gio, who was exhausted, and asked Naming who she was. Gio greeted Baiku and introduced himself as Li Gio. Baiku was surprised to see that she was a human and asked Naming if Gio was not her undertaker. Naming replied that she was right and asked Naming if Gio was with Ura and what had happened. Naming replied that it was a bit long to say, but for now Gio was in a similar situation in his. Baiku said through tears that he was charming, making Gio wonder if it was sympathy. Yamra angrily asked Baiku why he sympathized with Gio when it is a place of God's work, and ordered him to reveal his identity to his new employee. He cleared his throat knowing Yam was curious, so he introduced himself as the 12-year sign, axis of the zodiac sign called Baiku, and his position in hell was that of a Talbo staff. A moment later he sat down on the sofa and asked Baiku if what he was saying was that he didn't know why hell had become like this. To which she answered yes, and told him that when she suddenly came to her senses one day when she was there, he asked her if she knew where Talo was, and she said no. He shouted in frustration and said he thought it would be easy to find Talbo. She apologized to him because she could not be of any help to him. But he told her that it was not her fault and that, strictly speaking, it was a matter of Talbo. He then told himself to think about the possibilities of why things had come to this point. And I didn't know if anything had happened to Talbo. But he wondered if Talbo had done it intentionally. He put his hands to his face because it was too hasty to think about it, causing Bu to ask him if he was missing information. He looked at her and she told him that to find a way to overcome that situation. I was also working hard in many aspects, and I was sure that this would help too. He cheerfully told her that she was good at her job and asked her if she was interested in God's workplace. But she laughingly replied that she refused. He grabbed the paper while telling her that she was not funny, and assumed it was because she asked him where the person named Gio had gone because he had not seen her for a long time. He replied that Gio had been sent on a mission, causing Bu to ask him what mission. And he replied that it was a simple task. Meanwhile in the street the man was running, crying and screaming for help as Gio chased him. He shouted, telling her to stop there, while the people around wondered what was going on and if they were shooting a movie. Before Yam gave him the stick, making her ask him what it was, and he told her it was Harry Potter. She asked him why he was taking it, and he reminded her that he told her not to get beaten by that bully student, and she was the one who almost died because of him, so it was a special favor, and she had to take responsibility and complete the mission, because if she didn't, he would. He agreed with her and asked her what exactly he had to do when he found a student. But then Baika called you into the room, and he told Baika to wait a minute because he would be there shortly. She then told Gio that her job was simple, that she should scream like her while swinging Harry Potter. He swung the stick while yelling "Burn their Harry Potter" as he chased the fearful student. She was very embarrassed by what she was doing and wondered if that was why Boo felt sorry for her and thought she was a completely black company. But then he ran over someone as he was running. He immediately apologized to the person and explained that he was thinking of something else. The person was about to say that he was wrong, but then Yuna realized it was her, making her jump in surprise when she saw her too. Yuna asked him what he was doing there, and if he didn't understand when he was told to leave the job. He continually apologized to Yuna and told her that he would correct himself. But then Yuna grabbed her by her clothes and hid with her, while saying that it might work better to make her confused. Yuna told him he had to help her, and she asked him what she should do. Then he slowly glanced at what Yuna was looking at, and he saw a man walking forward and smiling with his jingling belly. Yuna told him seriously that from now on they had to catch this guy. Then Yana explained that it was the guy she was chasing, told Yuna that the man is dead, and asked if he should be subdued immediately. Yuna replied no, because the man would run away, and explained that the man was a master at running away. So they were going to follow him, and then look for an opening and attack by surprise. The man opened the lid of the garbage can, making Yana wonder what the hell the man was doing. Yuna replied that it was Petrola. She asked Yuna confusedly if that dead man was on patrol, and Yuna replied that she was right and knew it was hard to believe. But every time this man went through an area, a huge dead man always appeared afterwards to devastate it. So he guessed that maybe this man is his subordinate, and the task is perhaps to remove the obstacles. Then the man smiled as he saw the student hiding. I was surprised to see a civilian, and he immediately ran to them, but cursed in his mind. Thinking it was too late, fortunately Gio reacted quickly and grabbed the student in time. He then rolled in the air and crashed his body to the ground to protect the student. The dead man was startled to see him, but Yuna told him that he had done a good job. Then Yuna jumped towards the man and shouted that this time she would not fail him. He then activated his power by telling the man to engrave his sins. His fur turned white, and a huge hammer called the Scholar's Stigma appeared in his hand. He then brandished it at the man, causing him to look surprised. And she hit him with it, sending him flying into the wall with force. Yuna shouted to Jay and ordered him to evacuate the civilian and call for backup, to which she replied that she understood and told Yuna to hold on. Yuna told her that she has to return as soon as possible because, as she knows, she is not the type to fight without realizing the man was behind her. Ya looked at the man and was surprised that he had already recovered from the damage and wondered how he could. But she snapped, knowing that there was no time to be surprised and that she needed to move. Who swung his hammer to strike back at the man. She hit the man with her hammer, but the man blocked all her attacks, and she kept attacking. And he was startled when the man smiled at him. Then the man raised his hand and slammed it down with the hammer, making him realize that the man was after the hammer. And he floated his body in the air. Then the man punched her in the chin, causing her to cough up blood and push backwards. But he still managed to swing his hammer and hit the man in the face, causing him to bleed as well. He noticed that his attack had no effect and knew that if he did not put his feet on the ground, he could not generate enough destructive power. Then the man slowly opened his eyes and activated Idia's shroud, making you surprised. Then he saw the man transforming, releasing wings and horns. Then the smiling man revealed his ghost bat form. Suddenly, the man grabbed her by the cape and dragged her. Then he slammed her hard into every corner of the alley until her blood splattered everywhere. The man was still holding her, but she could not move. Then the man raised his hand and threw it forward to finish her off. Fortunately, a Kayan lunged into the man's side and hit him in the face in time, making the man step back and let go of Yuna. Yuna asked Gio if support would come quickly, and he would dodge the man's attacks when he replied that he had contacted him. Yuna asked him what he meant by contact and how many people he had called. He took a step back to dodge the man's attack as he replied that he had called a person and would probably arrive soon. Yuna told him that the man was not an ordinary dead man because the man wore shrouds, and at least 2 level 1 undertakers and several level 2 undertakers should come to call her an idiot. Then Yana shouted at him, asking him if he really called only one person and if he wanted to die there. But she only ducked to avoid the man's attack and give the man a hard kick in the face while telling Yuna that maybe not in that life, making Yuna ask him what he was talking about and look at her attacking the man as she wondered if she was always this good at fighting. Ya then noticed the red cord in his hand and thought he was wearing a shroud. The dead man coughed up blood, but he still managed to pull himself together and jumped away from Gio. Then the man lowered himself to the ground, causing her to realize that he had lowered himself. Then the man positioned himself and started circling around him. Yuna shouted at him to be careful because it was the man's ability to. Then the purple smoke appeared around the man, and when the smoke completely hid the man, he disappeared as Yuna told him that the man's skill was stealth. He was surprised that she was stealthy, so he quickly turned around to find the man. But she didn't see him, which made her wonder where he had gone without realizing that he was at her back. She looked back when she felt someone behind her and blocked the man's attack using her hands in time. But he closed his eyes without realizing it because of the pain. And when he opened his eyes, the man had disappeared again. He looked to his side wondering where he was. And then she felt something behind her, so she immediately looked behind her. But then an attack was launched on her, and she received a blow to her side, making her realize that he was standing next to her. The man smiled mockingly at him and then disappeared again, making her grit her teeth in rage because he was gone again. Then she quickly rolled over, wondering where the man was this time and whether he was coming from the front, from behind, or from the sides. She realized she was confused by the sound of the bell and wondered to herself if she could even win. She peeked behind her and heard Yice yelling at her that the man was getting close to her face 300. So she dodged the man's attack and looked up, then saw the man, making her unable to believe that she had actually dodged him. The man then angrily disappeared again. He immediately asked Yuna how she knew just now. Yuna replied that it was the ability of her shroud called Scholar's Stigma, and the target, who was hit by her even once in front of her eyes, could not escape from her. Then Yauna saw the man flying behind Gio, and he told her that he would guide her so she should trust her, to which she immediately said yes and asked him where the following came from. Yuna was surprised to see her and realized that Gio trusted her so much that she even closed her eyes. He called Gio and shouted and asked him if he could not keep his eyes open, who told him to close his eyes during the battle if he wanted to die, and who the opponent was. Making her apologize to Yuna, Yuna told her that she had seen too many movies and that it was really a battle. Then Yuna told him that the man would come at 600 torso. so he jumped back to dodge the man's attack and punched him in the face. Then Yuna told him she was coming to his leg 200, so he kicked the man in the face. Then Yuna told him that she is coming at 1000 torso, so he kicked her in time before he could attack her. Then he started yelling at him that he would come at 800 head 1000 leg, 500 torso 200 leg, and at 1000 the all-avoiding head hit the man. Yua encouraged her to get rid of the man while continuously beating the man without them realizing that someone was up there watching them. Apprentice Gachi said concerned that it was a bloody battle. He then looked at the man who was looking back at him, as he said that nowadays the undertakers are very scary, and told the man that there was nothing to look at. He also told the man that he was the one who sent him on patrol, so he should help him because it would be a shame for a deceased man with a bright future to die. AI smiled as he thought that he didn't even want to be scolded by him. Then AI jumped off the building and told Gio to stop there. She asked AI who he was, but Yuna told her to stay away because that man was the big guy she had told her about, and he was an apprentice named John AI. AI just told Yuna that it was an embarrassment to her and thanked her for noticing. He then asked if he could take the beaten man away while pointing his finger at him. Gio looked at the man as AI told him that there were only a few deceased who could use stealth, so the man was a rare talent. He asked them for a favor, but then a hammer was thrown towards A's face, and he was hit hard. Yuna told AI not to make her laugh. And he told Gio not to become agitated because the fact that the dead are very intelligent and can communicate. But then AI interrupted Yuna's words when she pulled out a talisman paper saying that it meant that they had killed a lot of people. Then AI drove his fist into Yuna's chest, causing Yuna to cough up blood. And he asked her why she was addressing him if she knew him well. Gio shouted Yuna's name in concern. But AI just took his hand off Yuna's chest. And she told Gio that her father was attacked right in front of her. But he was able to attack him right away. Then AI told her that he really hated the kind of person she was. He then pulled out a talisman called Sin Ofer and unleashed his Toys Priest ability to attack Gio, causing her to close her eyes in pain as she is stabbed by A's ability. AI laughed out loud as he attacked her and mockingly asked her how it was if she was still going to attack him like that. And why was she worried about her eldest when she could run away like crazy because that's how humans were supposed to be? Yuzai shouted that humans were pathetic and selfish. They were animals that did not care about the lives of others. And that was how humans should be. He called Jay pathetic because he was sure she would have run away by now. But when he stopped his attacks, he saw Gio bleeding continuously while protecting Yuna on the side, causing him to wonder if he had protected Yuna. He couldn't believe he hadn't tried to escape and asked him why he was protecting something that was nothing more than a living corpse. But she did not answer, making him angry. He asked him angrily if he had lost his mind, and why he was doing it when nowadays nobody would do something like that because his life was the most important thing. He said there was no way there was any sense of altruism left in today's world. But she only told him that she would tell him two things. One is that they didn't need a reason to save people, and the second is that right now they had committed a sin, a very big sin. Instinct screams desperately as Yam approaches him and orders him not to breathe. AI was stunned with fear and stopped breathing as Yam told him he had sinned. After the wounded human uttered those words, AI couldn't even look at them, but it wasn't as if they were ignoring him. He knew he didn't need to look at Yammer because he knew Yer was right behind him. So all he has to do is believe in that monster. His breathing stopped. However, if he breathes now, he will certainly die. AI closed his eyes and clenched the talisman in his hand while trying not to breathe. Yer walked past him as he frustratedly told himself to look at his mind. And worried, he asked Jibu if she was okay because he saw blood on her. With tears in her eyes, she replied that she was fine, but that her father was in critical condition. And even the shroud came off, so if he kept on like that, he would die. Suddenly, he tore the portal around them, causing her to scream his name in shock. She asked him what was bothering him so much when he was there making her touch and tea. Then, he saw the portal slowly closing. On the other hand, Yam thinks he's so cool because he ripped it off. Then, he walks forward smiling as the portal closes behind him. But then named him shouted at him, calling him stupid, causing him to jump in astonishment and tell Naming that he has startled him. Then he irritably tells him Naming that when he just looks at him, but keeps talking to him rudely, and Naming he angrily tells him to forget it, because there is something else more important, and he should come to his senses. He asks Naming if he would like to grind on the millstone in hell for 500 years, and asks Naming if he knows how good he was at grinding on a millstone, but Naming tells him that it was ridiculous, and that he was going back. AI, who witnessed it all, thinks that Yam doesn't seem like a big deal, and he wonders if he was too worried for anything. He then yells at Yam that he will pay dearly for having cheated him. But he just punches AI in the face, sending Achai flying away. Angrily tells Achai not to breathe because it was a waste of oxygen. AI managed to land properly on the ground and released his talisman while calling him a crazy bastard. Then AI asked him if he had not forgiven him, and what he was doing now. But he simply ran to Achai while calling him funny, and asking him what he meant by sorry. He then dodges A's attack gently, while telling AI that it was simply not a priority. The AI continuously casts his talisman to attack him, but he just dodges them easily while telling Achai that the most important thing in the field is the victim. And he angrily calls Achai a sinful bastard. Achai activates his ability to ridicule sin, and Yer uses his ability to burn the sinner. AI attacks him with his dumb ability, and in response, he counterattacks AI with his Hellfire ability. Their attacks collide in the center, but A's stupidity is pushed away by his infernal fire. In his head, AI calls him a crazy son of A, and can't believe that his shroud has been expelled. AI jumps to avoid his infernal fire and lands on a nearby building. However, AI is surprised to see him in front of him ready to attack. Hit AI in the side, causing AI to scream in pain and recoil. But then AI manages to activate his 8 gates of insanity and releases them to him. The talismans roll around him, and AI realizes that he has caught it. AI orders to seal his talisman of stupidity while clenching his fists. And silliness engulfs Yamra, shrinking and provoking continuous slashes. Then AI releases another talisman telling him that an empty carriage is noisy. But there is nothing special, and the meat will be cut. AI gathers his talismans and forms a huge sword. Then throw the sword towards Yamra and use penetrating wind. And Yamra is struck. AI laughingly asks him what he thinks, and tells him that the nonsense in his shroud has the power to seal, so the hellfire in his shroud has been sealed. AI laughs out loud and calls him stupid. Suddenly he unleashes his powerful fire, burning A's foolish abilities, while cursing AI and telling him that it is a cheating ability. He also tells AI that just as he said if it were a shroud. Then he raises his hand and asks what he should do with it, because that was just a hellfire he made, and it wasn't a shroud. AI can't believe it. Then he tells AI that hellfire is hellfire, and it is just a flame that burns sinners. Also, as much as the sin he has committed becomes stronger and more ardent, leaving Achai stunned with surprise at how strong he is. Tells Achai to bite down harder on his molar. He gathered his fire in his fist and released it toward AI. The fire flew directly towards AI, who was cursing in panic. AI used his seal of the 8 gates and the ability of the wind to counterattack the fire. But despite his efforts, his attack was being consumed by fire. He couldn't believe that his wind was being blown away. He pulled out his other talisman again, wondering what the flame was, and threw them into the fire while planning to avoid it for the time being. He then attacked the flame with his wind slash, and he jumped and flew to dodge the flames. He looked back wondering what it was without realizing it and above him, and punched him in the face, causing him to fall backwards onto the buildings. He immediately sat up, but when he was about to escape again, the flame was in front of him. Yam raised his hand over AI, who called him a monstrous bastard, asking if there was no cooling. But Yam just attacked AI with his flame, and the flame surrounded the area. AI knelt on the ground, feeling the heat of the flame, and he felt that his whole body was going to melt. Then he looked at Yamra, calling him a punk, and wondered what YS identity is. He entered the flame and asked why the Achai are not being consumed when it is normal for them to turn to ashes by now. Naming told him that they could not do anything, and that it was because he passed the SW and the shroud to the Talo, making him cry. Then Naming asked him what happens if he throws the children into hell and just leaves, and if he forgets that hell and the human world have different concepts of time. He replied that he had forgotten to do. Naming I could not believe him. Then AI informed him that he had taken the humans to a safe place, so he was not to worry, and gave her the Harry Potter stick, which he excitedly said, Naming that he had brought it on his own, and praised her for being smart. Naming told him that his affiliated bosses like him, so he has to be strong by making him ask Naming if he really wants to be one. Replaced while AI tried to walk away, knowing that he has to run away. Then AI crept silently away, thinking that the monster wasn't paying attention to him, and now that the flames had gone out, it was his only chance. Then Achai swore he was going to escape from there, and that he should let him know that the guy behind him was dangerous, but then a foot appeared in front of him. Yamra bent down to ask him where he was going, making you tremble with fear. Then AI raised his head to tell him that it had been a mistake, and that he had not done it on purpose, and that he should let him off the hook. Also, the Undertakers are not dead, and begged for forgiveness. AI shakily pleaded with him, and vowed that he would reflect and repent. He also promised to lead a pleasant life from now on. Yam asked AI if he is really going to be kind, and the AI replied that he will not hurt anyone from now on, while telling himself in his head not to be fooled. He asked AI if she wanted him to tell her a story from the past. He then told AI that one day a woman who had lost her son arrived in hell, and the king of hell asked the woman why she had gone there. The woman said it was because her son had died. He asked her again who had killed her baby, and the woman replied in tears that the king had killed him. He claimed that the king had provoked the war and the famine that caused his son's death, but he knew that the war had been started by the king, but in the end, that woman boiled the child and ate it. Then he told AI that sinners are always the same, and if they are in a bad situation they all lie naturally. They hurt others without hesitation, but they hate to be hurt themselves, which bothers him. AI told him that he really had no choice, but just told AI that was the reason he created hell. AI asked him if he had created hell, and then AI bowed his head trembling, and he said that the person in front of him was the king of the underworld. Then AI cried out in panic and opened his seal of the 8 gates. He attacked him with the Wind Dragon ability, but only told AI that he was granting him his judgment, and that the sinner is extremely shameless and has no sense of duty and shows no signs of remorse. He put his flame on Harry Potter's stick, calling AI a sinner and telling him that he would cut off his reincarnation. He then brandished his Harry Potter staff at AI with his bonsai soul power in it, changed it to the first form Jin, turning it into a sword and slitting AI by cutting a chai in half. and his slash reached even the red moon above them.